This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Welman.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod again, or should I rather call it the really wrong pod? Harry, what do you think about that?
How's it, MVA? Yeah, we're hardly ever wrong. It's we're getting tired of ourselves being so right. It's hard to be this right. I think we've forgotten how to be wrong.
And it's humble. I mean, that's our main characteristic. Tell me, you're on your way pretty soon, coming to South Africa to attend both matches. It's the two biggest rugby weeks of the year. So set the scene for us a little bit. What do you expect from this overall, and what can we look forward to?
You know how everything goes back to childhood? You know, like right now I'm actually visiting my parents, and I was doing a job, and I had time to reflect because I had a lot of time. And you go back to your parents' house, or you go to a house which has memories from old houses, and you kind of go back. You almost go back to siblings, rivalry. Maybe you catch one of your siblings, and even though you're old and grown up, you fall into the same rivalries. You're competing for attention. You fall into your worst habits. You become the worst version of yourself. Carl Jung talked about how sibling rivalry is the most is explanatory force in the universe. If you want to know why someone did something big in history, don't talk about the river and the arms and the tanks and the resources. Go back to childhood. And so to me, All Black Springboks is a bit like that. I mean, there's some momentary rivalries here and there, but this is like siblings. This is older brother. All Blacks had the wood on us for a long time. In the last 11 matches, it's 5 wins, 5 losses, and 1 draw. This could be the 3rd in a row for the Springboks, which is really unusual. You have to go back 2009, I think, before you have a 3 in a row. So if you think of the All Blacks as the older brother, the one that kind of always had the favor, always did everything right, he was that guy. And we're kind of the naughty, younger guy, which is like me and my family. It makes more sense, We're actually better, but we don't know it yet. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy because we self-sabotage and we're too impulsive. And the older brother is just, doing the right thing and all that. But we are better. And we're just a little bit smarter now. We're just a little bit quicker, a tiny bit stronger. But they're always the favorite. They have to be the favorite. Why? Because they're dutiful. They do their duty. They do the right thing. They have the right uniform. They have the pleasant little haka thing that they do. They're always in good graces. The laws seem to sort of shift to fit whatever their body shapes is at the moment. Whatever they don't like. Oh my gosh, sorry. Can we give you the split peas instead of the mashed peas? Do you like your lamb this way or that on the bone? Okay, here it is. So I think we go back to this kind of a rivalry, and we remember how beautiful it is. How beautiful it is to be in the backyard and pitch yourself against someone that's just a little bit, older, but you want to take them down. When you finally put them in the armbar and you make them submit, it's such a beautiful day. It changes your life. It's because the currency when we're kids is all about our parents' favor. And in rugby, this is the unofficial World Championship that was always there even before the World Cup. The World Cup just acknowledged that it's always All Blacks and Springboks with a sprinkling on the side of Aussies and English, but it's still basically these two teams battling for supremacy. No quarter asked, no quarter given, but a proper rivalry.
I'm a oldest child myself, and I know exactly what you mean, the responsible one, the one that looks after everyone. And then one day you're in a wrestling match or an arm wrestling match with your little brother, and he beats you. That's unexpected. And then your little brother, the only reason why he doesn't do it consistently is he doesn't believe that he can do it. He's not mentally there yet. Physically and everything else, he's there, like exactly where the Springboks are at the moment. But do you think mentally we believe that we are now sort of on a par or even better than our older brothers here? Or do you think that's still a bit of a barrier for us?
I think only now. Only now. I hate to use the term because it sounds like, economic boffins, but the inflection point. I think we're at an inflection point in that one line has been traveling up gradually, the other one's been traveling down gradually. And that is always difficult to measure because sometimes it gets stuck right at the inflection point, or there's a wobble and it goes back. But if you actually look at the results and what both teams wanted the most, on that night, on that rainy night, last year in Saint Denis. There was only a sliver between them, but it was something. It was something really big. It was something that, as players always say, you can't take that away from me. You can't. So there it is. And so the only way there is a way to take it away from you, and it's to do it now, right? So what the All Blacks would have to do is start to wrestle back, like that backyard. If you're the older brother and you want to take it away from me, and I just learned that you have a weakness I didn't know about, or your psychological tricks, don't work on me anymore, then it's really tough to get it back. That's what Razor faces. Razor is obviously showing all the pressure of a young coach, new coach to test rugby. Rassie's been there for a long time, so you have an interesting, maybe a flip side of that is, the one side you have Tony Brown, intimately aware of all the Kiwi tricks and nonsense, and you have Razor Robertson, who grew up, beating South African teams through the Crusaders, through that avenue, and now he has to do it a different way with maybe lacking a little bit of acumen. I think the whole script has shifted. The younger brother has gone off and come back with a law degree, and the older brother was working at the factory on a family business, and now it's kind of weird. Like, what are you talking about, younger brother? So, for example, there's two or three positions. There's two or three depth charts on every position with the Springboks. The same is not true for the All Blacks. The players are empowered in the Bok team, not just from the fact of having 80, 70, 60 caps, but 50 caps with each other. So now there's not really going to be, Coach Stick, and what a name. He really sticks. He's the one who sticks with the team. Look at, Liam McDonald doing this and Felix Jones doing that. There's one guy who just sticks. But it's not much he has to tell Damien and Jesse or Lukhanyo why would he have to tell them? They can go to the next level. They're playing chess at next level. You can look across the team of the Springboks, and Rassie has made a concerted effort to get away from this incumbency idea. There's only a few positions where you would say that, if it had to be for all the nuts and all the marbles, Sia Khaleesi is going to be on the field because he's the captain. Eben Etzebeth would lock down tight head side. Frans Malher would prop on tight head side. And you would think that you'd have that midfield I just spoke of. Beyond that, there's three of every varietal. Depends on the weather, depends on the 7-1, the 6-2. We're coming into a match that's going to have that exact set of questions because, and I can tell you right now, because we always write, Eben's out. Eben Etzebeth is out with a pulled back. So there's a reveal for you guys. When you disturb that, with all the locks out, lure it out. Archie was wearing a moon boot yesterday, walking around Josie. John Klein still hasn't come back. Could we see Elrich Lowe playing with Peter Steph Toy in the second row at the end of the match in Ellis Park? We could. Now, don't panic. What I'm saying is that's my point. In other teams, if you had someone like Maro Itoje go out, and someone else that was huge, England would be would toast. But Rassie has been contingency man all along, and that's why he's played around with players. He's tried to figure out of the Lucies, of Ruiz or Lowe, which one tackles harder, and which one could be a line-out option better. And he doesn't just talk to his coaches. He sits down with a Dwayne Vermeulen, a new coach, or a Peter Steph Toy who he trusts. Like he just trusts. And says, when you get tackled in practice, who makes you feel, more painful? And Elrich Lowe is winning that, the sheriff. So you have these kind of mixes and matches. But yeah, Eben's not going to play. He's out for at least a couple of weeks. Nothing serious, but they don't want to aggravate it. And so this whole, pack and the bomb squad, all that is now up for grabs. And now what Rassie would say to us is, now you see all you grumpy ooms out there telling me what to do. I was always making sure that if I didn't have Eben, and if I, and I wanted to start Sasha, or maybe I don't start Sasha, because depending on who the 7-1 is, this is the key. So we're about to see a very smart team, a very adaptive team up against kind of an old school bully team. Scott Barrett reminds you of a prefect from 1955 giving you unofficial cuts. The fact that, 1/3 of the team comes from one set of DNA. It's so 1955. They're playing big. Sam Cane looks like a guy again from the 1960s. They're not really playing tricks. They're not doing inventive things. What has the All Blacks innovated in the last 5 years? What is anyone copying from the All Blacks? Is it no one, right? They just play really hard and they're really quick and they got a lot of spirit and they're tough guys. But it's not really looking like the world is being led by New Zealand. It's being led in Ireland and it's being led in South Africa. Those two polar forces.
The other side of the younger brother realizing that he's now up to it is the older brother realizing that he's past it. So let's just talk about the All Blacks briefly. You mentioned now that they've not been innovating, nothing. But they've been the kings of consistency in terms of their coaching. They've had Henry and then Hansen and then Foster. But now it's all new, it's all changed. And they threw out the baby with the bathwater. And then they threw out the baby again with Leon McDonald leaving now. There seemed to be a bit of a team in a bit of disarray, don't you think? And not sure what to do. Razor, I was watching this one interview where he said, yeah, but Leon is the guy who says what can go wrong. And I'm the guy who says what can go right. There seems to be a philosophical difference which they've now rudely or crudely eliminated. So I don't know. Do you expect anything different from them? Do you think we're going to just see more of the same? Or do they have a plan up their sleeves? Or what does a bully do when he gets confronted? He falls back in his old style, then that's not going to win them any favors with the Springboks. They're not going to step up to the plate. And I'm happy to say that we've been commenting about the fact that we talk about rugby and many other things. I think it's the first time that a Intel CEO was quoted on a rugby pod. So there you go on the inflection points. Well done. So how did they turn that inflection point? How did they turn that graph, the trend on that graph? How did they turn that around against their arch enemy?
Yeah, well, so for a while they were just babies, right? Not covered that well because of the French dummy spit, one of the all-time dummy spits, which still hasn't been punished by World Rugby, where they questioned the ethics of one of our best referees. But that was overshadowing the fact that the All Blacks didn't really accept the loss with the humor and cheer and respect that we're used to from them. And to be fair, losing by 1 point in the rain, where there's a card and there's all these split hairs, being on the wrong side of that would have been really tough. But what I'm saying is, they're still they were trapped for a long time in the what should have been, who did this to us, this wasn't right. And as we Springbok fans know very, very well, that doesn't do you any good. It sticks you in a cycle. You're grumpy all the time. You don't innovate. So they actually had to get out of that. And then they chose a man who's really not known for innovation so much as culture, for building an internal culture that trusts each other, that will die for each other and go out on a shield. But it's not so technically brilliant. It relies on a big pack of forwards and then a bomb squad at Christchurch. They just brought on the bomb squad in a dark field. The lights never worked that well. It always seemed like you were in the end of the world. Your next stop was South Pole. And it had an inevitability to it. It had the chies. It was like in a way, the Crusaders could be viewed as almost like a classic old school South African team. And they didn't do that many tricks. They were not tricky like the Blues. They didn't pull things like the Hurricanes. And they didn't have, breakdown technical ability like the Chiefs. The Crusaders just rolled over you like a chariot. So they brought that Crusader ethos in with Razor. Razor stumbled against England but survived, and then he just broke his toe against Argentina. So now he's hobbling around. And he wants to reassert his dominance. In classic emperor mode, he blames someone else and cuts them. Leon McDonald was like the Jacques Nienaber. Nienaber would talk Rassie out of his craziness, and it was just that right recipe, just enough. But don't talk him out of the good ideas either, like let a few through. And then in the end, the blend comes through. It looks like from the current squad, Tony and Jerry have to kind of double team. And then I think Dwayne may be also one of those guys who can hold Rassie down and say, no, we're not going to do an 8-0 bench or something. But I think Razor maybe doesn't have enough ideas anyway. I think it's been a little bit overrated. The depth of his creative mind. I think he's actually more like a by the numbers guy. He believes in percentages. He does a lot of analytics. Ronan O'Gara talked about it on several pods that I listened to, where he went down to the South Island thinking he would find secret recipes and magic mixes, the potions of obliques and asterisks. And instead he found that they loved each other, They had a monopoly on big, tight forwards, and they were able to roll people. So I talked about this last week about how Razor might be going back to his roots, you know. And again, this could be a family issue. So it's interesting. I do interrogations a lot for a living, and I, instead of like scaring someone like I used to do, or pound something or throw something, I actually want to know about someone's background, their childhood, and their siblings. I'd be very interested to know about Razor's background because this is going to be tested. This week has been really rough on him. And he's probably looking at this match as almost too important. I think on the other side, while Rassie and the guys really want to win this, they really, really do. I don't think it will break them. I don't think it's as critical. I think the All Blacks are sitting there thinking, what if we start the season having stumbled against England, just scraped through, we lose to Argentina, and then we get smashed at Ellis Park, which is a real possibility, right? It could happen. And then you're limping down to Cape Town, and what if you get towel there? I mean, it just looks like one of those seasons where a rookie coach starts to be questioned of, were you up for the job? So I would think there's a lot of pressure. You know, Rassie and his guys have been eating pressure, living off pressure, putting pressure in their sandwiches, you know, on purpose. You know, even the way he selects people and rotates, it's just no one's comfortable. So it's almost like Rassie's childhood, which we've read about in the book, was so tumultuous. And, you know, am I loved? Am I not loved? Am I good? Am I bad? You know, these things that are inside our heads, if we're honest. Am I good enough? You know, the world needs more of me or less of me. All these weird stuff. You know, I think the Boks are really comfortable in their skin. And even losing a guy like Ibn Etzebeth, a real stalwart. Maybe he injured his back when he was celebrating with Rickus du Plessis. I don't know. Sorry, guys, I'm just speculating. But if you lose a guy like that, it doesn't feel like if the All Blacks lost to Artie Savea, if tomorrow they said, oh, Artie's out, it would just seem like, oh, okay, now we're not going to win. You know, All Blacks are looking for reasons. The card wasn't right. It was too rainy. Wayne Barnes shouldn't have gone back 2 phases. It's reminiscent of that older brother syndrome, trying to explain away why the inflection seems to be going away. And I think if you look before 2018, it wasn't really even close. Well, there's a reason why if the All Blacks win both of these tests, that they go ahead in South Africa over the whole history of tests play between the Boks and the All Blacks, they would be ahead. That's insane. The reason why is from about, late 90s all the way through 2018, even though there were a lot of close matches, even though there were like rippers, like 2013, there were, legendary classics, the All Blacks always found a way to win. And now with a 5-5-1 in the last 11 matches and coming up on 3 in a row, it looks like the Boks have stopped being in their own heads. And the Cranberry song is really like actually happening, not so much with Ireland, but with the All Blacks.
Well, on the subject, you said the Boks would dearly want to win this game. And I want to ask you about that. There's a lot of debate about whether Rassie is really worried about winning this championship, or if he's more worried about rebuilding his team without upsetting the apple cart, if I can use that sort of hackneyed comparison. Do you really think they're too concerned? They're very concerned about winning the championship, and by that I mean winning this match, or would they be okay with losing it but learning something again? I know a lot of people will demand his head again if that is the approach, but let's be honest. What do you think is his approach? Because that now determines the game plan, the selections, everything else. So first and foremost, is he going to go careful, conservative to make sure they win the championship? Is he going to be more adventurous? He's going to take a couple of chances, a couple of gambles maybe on a couple of players there. He's got the challenge of ever not playing. What would his thinking be going into these 2 matches?
No one's taking Rassie's head. And Rassie knows that. So, like, there's minuscule pressure on Rassie. He could lose this test and nothing's going to happen. I mean, are we going to be cross? Are we going to, sit around the fire and throw our beers here and there and talk about what we're going to do? Whatever. It's going to continue on. The Rassie regime is here. How badly? What does the fire burn inside Rassie to win? Oh, it's bright, it's big, it's strong, it's hot. I think he wants it. But not in the context of the rugby championship. Just in the context of used the word rectification before the Irish series. I think this is something similar of you shouldn't win in South Africa. All Blacks shouldn't win in South Africa. That became too common. And it's literally 26-25-1 or something like this now. So that isn't right. I don't think Rassie grew up in the Eastern Province thinking that was normal. And I think there's something about him that wants to set that right. I don't know about the Cape Town test. So I don't know what happens if, Springboks win very well in Ellis Park. I think you could see quite a bit of changes because that's been the form. Not just to clown someone, not just to say, like the older brother or younger brother would do when you finally win. I don't know, grind your elbow a little bit more in there and talk to the guy, talk to your brother about how you beat him. But I think there's a bit of Rassie that also just wants to set the record straight. So I don't think that he's ever taking a test against the All Blacks lightly. However, I don't think he's looking at the log points and saying, okay, so we get this and you get that, and we can win. I don't think he cares about this so-called championship. I don't think it factors into his overall reckoning. I don't think he establishes depth charts on that basis. I think he's looking at, okay, I have 15 tests to put this many caps and this many people. They have this age, they have this cap count, we have these skills to notice. And by the way, I want to move the All Blacks. Okay, so I think that's the mindset. If you can go deep into the recesses. I don't also think that he would think it's the end of the world to lose, but he would love to win. I always put sportsman classifications of, do you love to win more than you hate to lose? Is a reason why you're winning a lot because you hate to lose. Like Bjorn Borg said that he couldn't handle losses. Like he would not sleep, not eat if he lost someone, lost. And then another time, like Pete Sampras in tennis, was just love to win. If he lost, he literally didn't even care. Like he would shake your hand and go off and say, "Get you next time." It was the love of winning that drove him. So I think in a way you could look at that for Rassie is, I think he loves to win, but I think he's learned how to handle losses. And I think he didn't always know that, but I think he's matured and he's found a way to process that. So I think he's approaching this as the real yardstick, the actual metric. This is the benchmark, not the Irish, although they're right there. This is the one where if you can put the All Blacks to bed on your home turf at Ellis Park on a hard track using speed, intelligence, superior brains, not brawn, better fitness. I think he wants not only an inflection point on the win-loss, I think he wants to change the narrative.
Yeah. No, that's part of it. I was wondering about the fact that we talked about the All Blacks being in a bit of disarray for Asia there, and a lot of players not being up for selection because they're playing overseas. That seems to be on the way to changing. But how much of it do you think is Rassie going to use the opportunity? How much is Rassie going to use the opportunity to sort of give the All Blacks a psychological blow, so that they now become the de facto underdogs going forward? Like, we don't go into the next season's games and saying, but the All Blacks always are the favorites. It must become a mental thing that it's the other way around. Do you think that's part of it?
Yeah, I think that really irritates him. The idea that it was us trying to measure up. So to go back to our sibling rivalry issue, I think that there's a point where you no longer have that fear factor. And it's really strange when it's gone. So I think some of the younger players that don't have the fear of the All Blacks that some of the much more experienced ones had. You can look at it this way. How many times has Eben lost to the All Blacks? So many more times than the guys coming in right now. So I think, like a guy like Jasper Wiese wouldn't have inherited those battle scars. He would have just thought, they're a team. Sometimes they win, sometimes we win. I don't think there's any aura there. I don't think Jasper Wiese looks across and says, oh, geez, Sam Darry's going to tackle me. I don't think that's his mind. So I think there's a bit of that, and maybe it's because Brodie Retallick, Sam Whitelock have gone away. You don't have that Richie Mwanga factor. Bowden Barrett's probably lost a couple of steps, so you wouldn't say that there's anyone on the All Black side that's quicker, brainier. I'm actually having a hard time right now thinking of someone who's got the full package over Peter Steph Toy on effort, skill, and brains of actual rugby IQ in that pack. I mean, to me, Scooter Barrett's just an old school lock who's trying to play like a flank. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. They get a lot of cards. They were the card leaders in 2023. It wasn't a one-off that Sam Cane got carded. They were the leading card magnet in the tournament. They were just good enough to get around it. So I think, those things matter. I think Rassie wants to portray the Boks as an evolving, adaptive team in which there are 3 people at every position who are world-class and can be called upon at a moment's notice. He looks across at the All Blacks team and he knows they don't have that. Do they have top-line players? Absolutely. You can still look across and say at every position, the All Blacks have really good players except for maybe lock. But as I just stated, we have a lock injury crisis. So we don't have that inherent superiority of looking at Ibn Luad or Ibn Mostert or Ibn Archid. None of those are there. So we have to play our own Sam Darries and figure out if Nico is good enough. We have to figure out, do we use Ruan in a match of this magnitude? Do we use makeshift locks like Peter Steph and Elrich at some point? Look, this game is almost impossible to predict, even on personnel. And it smells to me like one of those matches that is like reminiscent of the great ones where both teams really come in just breathing fire. I think this is one of those matches where you really get to test a few players. And just by the way, I don't think that we're going to see, all the hallmark, landmark names for the All Blacks either. You're going to see guys perhaps that you don't know at backup 9. There's going to be plenty of people that run on the field that you haven't really got a good clue on. Like I just mentioned, Sam Darry, 24 years old, three caps for the Blues. And you have a lot of people playing this match that are just 3 or 4 or 5 cap guys for the All Blacks.
All right, so now we've established what each team wants from these games, and let's talk about what type of game plan they're going to be approaching. Let's start with the Boks. What do you think Rassie is going to want to do? Is he trying to change the way the Boks play a bit more? We know Tony is now trying to stamp his authority on the team and the likes. It's going to be much more of a running game, much more power, like we said, speed. But also, like you said many times before, versatility. Now it seems to be the key word almost in this match with all these injuries. What are you expecting from the Boks in terms of the way they're going to approach this game, purely in terms of game plan?
Yeah, so it's a very South African game plan still, but South African rugby, I think, is different under Rassie and what he wanted to be. And then you bring Tony in and it makes it even a little bit more different. The Irish model of beating the All Blacks is differed from the traditional South African way of beating the All Blacks. So there were always 2 ways of beating the All Blacks. One, and it's the hardest thing in rugby because they have, over the course of rugby, been the best team, which is why they go into this match as favorites. They will always be favorites. It's going to take a long, long time before they lose their favorite mantle. Sorry, but that's the way it is. Even if the form doesn't favor it, and even if you look at the team sheets and say we're better, they still the favorites. So how do you beat the favorite? Ireland took New Zealand into scoring competitions, not with the speed of the player, but the speed of the ball. So the ball shifted quicker than the man could adjust. Quick tip passes, 2 meters, 3 meters max. They didn't do long. They didn't even do cross kicks that much. It was actually keeping everything more in the middle, diamond-shaped approaches like you see Tony doing, where there's a lead runner and there's 2 people, either side and then 1 behind, and you never know which one's going to. They all run the same. They look the same. They all look ready to run. They do their decoys really well. So if James Ryan is looking like a decoy, he teaches himself not to be a decoy. So the All Blacks were confused by that. They lost to Ireland a few times that were really important to them. And so Rassie has taken that on and said, could we, for 40 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, do that? In some ways, you can look at the Irish series in South Africa as being a test run of that. So the Loftus match, you could say, could the Springboks put that on New Zealand? Then you go back to the Twickenham match and you say, yeah, 22 and 23, there was a match where we kind of steamrolled them, not just with power, not with the old tropes of, brawn and big guys and all that. It was really a speed approach. There is the other way, which is, maybe on a different night and a different weather pattern, you could take the All Blacks into the 12-11 kind of match. which we also know how to win. But I think Rassie's thinking we already know how to win that. Like we actually have that in our back pocket. We can really select a team that does that, and we have people who can play that. We want to be able to, if we have to, outscore them. Like not have one of those thrillers like in 2013 where it's thrilling and we say, oh, what a great match. Nigel Owens is the greatest referee ever because he creates these spectacles, but then we lose. He wants to have those when we win, like in 2000. We have a 42 to something win, and Fleck is running through and scoring 3 tries. I think Rassie wants to be able to do both and have not only, slight superiority, but inherent superiority, not necessarily this year, but over the course of the next 4 years, so that when we go into the next World Cup, I think he wants to be the favorites, but I think he wants to teach South Africans how to be the favorites. And I think Rassie has had to teach himself how to be the favorite, how to be happy when you're winning, not to always look, for some argument or dispute. I think Rassie wants to build that. So I think you look at this test and it's quite important because I think he thinks he can put speed, have a speed edge. Rugby has always been about mismatches, finding mismatches on the field. And I think Rassie's thinking with Williams and Reinach at 9, and you can, start one and bring the other one, doesn't really matter, I think. Maybe it's Reinach, then Williams. When you have loose trios, which are peopled by such hard workers like Ben Jason Dixon, on top of Pieter-Steph du Toit, the hardest worker in world rugby, but actually quick. If Pieter-Steph's at lock, then he's a really quick lock. Ben Jason Dixon, as I've covered, is not so much quick straight line speed. I don't know what his Bronco time would be, but he knows how to get from ruck to ruck really quickly. And then you have the Lekker backs that are quicker, side to side than anyone in world rugby. You have Willie Leroux, who's not quick as a sprinter necessarily, but he can put you into the quick space. He can find the alleys and the channels where, that leading you just with that flat, like forward, but not really forward flat pass, that one. And then you have guys at the front row. Steenekamp is no slouch. So if you go Ox off the bench as a bomb squad, that's a quick bomb squad with marks. Or you can start, Ox, but or you can have a Steenekamp at front row. It starts to look like to me, even if you throw in Kwacha and you throw in guys like that, we're just quick forwards. That the overall position of Rassie is we're quicker than them. They have Rico Wani and they Mark Talea and they have Will Jordan. Then you struggle to find a quick guy. They're not quick at 9. Their pack doesn't look that quick. Sam Kane's not a quick guy. The locks, Scooter Barrett, not a speedster. Tamaiti Williams, who has to come in for the Groot, is 145 kilograms, so he's going to slow down. It's almost like you're looking at an inflection point, not just on the results, but on the style of play. What if the plan now is to tire out the All Blacks? What if it's to get the big All Black forwards tired and then apply the slow poison a different way than the old South African poison? It's not just 3-3-3-3-3. Maybe it's 7-7. Score some tries, put heat. And it looks like to me that Rassie's not so much banking on the bomb squad against the All Blacks like he does against every other team. He's absorbed the lessons of 2024, which is the team that's getting out in front early is very difficult to beat. All these matches this season between test sides, you got to start well, otherwise you're catching up like in Durban against Ireland. Yes, you catch up, but it's so much effort to catch up. So I think quick start, quickness, speed of thought. And of course, we're all waiting to see what where Sasha plays. Is he the 23? Does he start at 15? Or does he start at 10? That's probably the one that is the closest guarded secret. I'm giving our viewers some inside information on Archie's moon boot and Ibn's back, and I'll stand by it. But I have no idea who's starting at 10. All the training drills have been equal. Andre, Sasha, you don't know who's doing it. It's almost like they're having a game themselves. I almost start to think, MV, that they don't know. And that it's going to be a flip of the coin, or that Rassie's going to, just come out of the toilet tomorrow morning and say, oh, now I know.
Well, I've been talking about the All Blacks conditioning a little bit. And they're playing at Ellis Park. Probably, well, it's the highest stadium in South Africa. And we've always said altitude matters. We've talked about it against the Irish as well. And you talked about the speed and running them off the feet. And maybe that plays into that, the fact that they're actually playing at Ellis Park. Ellis Park is an ally in that respect, isn't it?
Yeah, and it doesn't work as well against a supremely conditioned team like Ireland. I mean, it helps if you are, in fact, as comfortable as they are. I never felt that. I never felt like against Ireland there was really a fitness edge for either side. But I do think that the All Blacks coming out of Super Rugby, which obviously by now we know was short of a gallop, it didn't have the same grind. It didn't have the same extremeness. And then you think that English matches were kind of sedentary. There was a pedestrian quality to those. And against Argentina, there was sort of that one gallop at the end. But it was a blitz. It was an old-fashioned All Blacks blitz where you score 3 or 4 tries in a hurry and it's done, you know? Has that happened against the Springboks? Well, there was one moment pre-World Cup, that shortened rugby championship in 2023, where the All Blacks started, but it was against an experimental side. And then Peter Steff and the boys came on and won the second half. So it wasn't quite as comprehensive. I don't see any possibility of that happening at Ellis Park. I don't see the All Blacks coming out in first half and just putting a blitz on like they did it in Albany or wherever it was. I do think this is going to be a grind in the beginning, but Rassie thinks that if you have a couple of moments, 2 or 3 moments in that first half, and you finish them, unlike against Australia where we botched a few, that this thing could have scoreboard pressure. So I think the goal is to show the All Blacks that we can be front runners, we can win the first half, not just come back with bomb squads. And to that end, he might bomb squad the starting team. He might flip that around. And so that's why I think you might have Skinnerkamp, I think Hendrik Cronje, that's always right as well. He's even more right than us on picking possible teams. That's not really our forte necessarily. But he's pointed out that possibility. I think with the injury issues that I've just mentioned, though, there's going to be some scramble. So, you know, up until the familiar Tuesday announcement, we don't know about some of these positions, especially on the back line.
Yeah. We'll see that tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we'll discuss what team was actually selected compared to ours, which I think we must go into detail now. But let's talk about our team and start firstly by your bench. What split do you go for?
I think you have to go 7-1 for the game plan of speed, because it's a speed game plan actually affects the forwards more than the backs, if that makes sense. I mean, all the backs can run all game. So all you got to do is have a scrum off that can play every position. So that's Williams, or Reiner can play the wing. In a push, you could put both of those at 15, and you can slide anyone along the 10 to 13 axis. So it's going to be a 7-1, in my opinion. And you're going to load up with forwards so that you can tell your starting forwards they can empty the tank. And you don't know which ones can go 80. You're going to have a few that you say, I hope you go 80. Peter Steff kind of needs you to go 80. But if you don't, then you're going to have Ben Jason Dixon, that's sort of a clone. And you have Lowe, the sheriff, who's also sort of a mini clone. And so that should solve your problems. And then you can have a Marco, a Kwacha to bring on the speed. Because what you're trying to do is build speed on the ball, but you're also trying to build speed off the ball, because your blitz defense, which is what we should call it more than a rush defense. A rush defense connotes that everyone is going up in a single line. A blitz means that you have salience. You will have a guy go beyond enemy lines, behind enemy lines, which we're used to seeing from Creel, from Peter Steff, and to some extent now this season with Sia, piercing, going up. But that's a lot of work for a forward. If you're Sia Khaleesi and you're reloading, and a lot of what you do doesn't land. You know how boxers tell you that when we swing and we miss, we expend more energy than when we land. So it's when you are going and you're not touching anyone and you miss everyone, it's hard to keep reloading. So you have to tell Sia, brother, you just got to give us 45 minutes of, throw up energy, just go. And if you know, then you have to have a 7-1 or it's going to be too rough. So I think that's where we go. So I think the one is just, whoever the The unlucky guy is from 9. It doesn't matter. I think they view Williams and Reinach as both reliable. The reason why they might pick Reinach is about who they pick at 10, but we don't know that.
All right, let's talk about the front row quickly. You said probably Gerard Steenekamp, probably Bongi, and then in terms of speed, you were talking about speed. France is not the greatest exponent of speed, and you talked about swapping the bench sort of around, like Franco Smith does with the Glasgow Warriors. He starts his bench, and then after 30 minutes, take them off and bring the real heavy guns on. We think we might see something like that. Maybe Thomas Atoy coming on with Gerard Steenekamp to make that front row mobile as well as strong.
Well, so every doctrine has its exceptions, right? Like every religion, every theology has the rule and the doctrine, and then it has the exceptions. Thou shalt not kill, but you can in these situations. So speed, yes, but you have to have a tight head. If your tight end can be quick, well, great, that's wonderful. But in reality, what you don't want to have is Tamati Williams harvesting penalties at scrum time, which negates all your speed because now you're pinned down in your 22, or the All Blacks exit well. All Blacks exit game is bad. So the Boks want to put pressure on that by having scrums which reap penalties because Frans Malherbe is the greatest penalty harvester in World Rugby at scrum. I've done this analysis. It's been criticized, but I promise you guys, I've actually gone and been fair and gone back to all the penalties that happened while France was a tight end for the Boks, and it's like plus 34, arguably plus 37. So that's how many more penalties he's gotten for the Boks than he's been pinged. I know there's some guesswork there on who is assigned the penalty, and I tried to be actually kind of conservative. What I mean is that's a weapon. That's a weapon because if France can do his job and still maintain his position as a defensive vice captain, which he is, he makes his tackles, he doesn't miss his tackles close to the ruck, then that allows you to bring your speed into play, because when you're on advantage or you're going to the 22 and you set up a maul, then we can see the trick plays where Jesse Creel is running inside Damien Delende, or you have Colby playing a double back. Those things only come into play when you're safe, because you don't want to launch too many plays. So I think France is a lock. He's definitely a first pick. He's the one you write down and say, I don't want to start losing penalties to them, because let's remember how good the scrum is of the All Blacks. It's definitely one of the top 2 scrums in World Rugby. That's why the final was so gripping, is because there was parity at scrum. So I don't think Rassie can afford to leak penalties. That's actually, when I say that, that's a great statement of faith in Steenekamp. I think this is the arrival. If you can pick him for this match, that's saying something.
Yeah, it's interesting. You sound like Donnie Craven now, Doc Craven. Who's the first person you select is your tight head, and the second one, your backup tight head. So there you go. Rugby wisdom from Stellenbosch. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Now let's talk about that Tamaleki. You just thought the conundrum. Tamaleki is an Afrikaans word that I love to use, because it means it's a sticky, sweet, difficult thing to chew on. And that's your number 4 lock suddenly, if Evert's not available. And Salman, I don't know if he's ready yet or what happened, because he went off after 80 minutes against Australia, and I don't even know if he's in the same league as Evan. What do we do at 4 starting this game?
Yeah, I don't know. This is something that they're probably doing the most thought about, is not so much even who starts at lock, the locking duos. So you have to cover line-out calling. This points out the wisdom of picking Nico from Montpellier. So there's a possibility here that all along they knew that there was a back issue. There's a possibility that they were always guarding against that, and they had Nico picked as one of our go-to guys just to start. They already know he has high work rate. If you pair him up with Pieter-Steph du Toit, you already have solidity there in the second row. But I think that the 4 issue means that Pieter-Steph will start at lock, is what I think happens. So they work backward from 5. And then they just pair anyone in there, and it could be Nico, and he's the line-out caller. So you don't give Pieter-Steph the duty of calling a line-out. If you have that shape, do you put Low in at 7, or do you slot in Ben Jason? So there's an argument that you hold Ben Jason back. Ben Jason and Elrich can play lock. So you've kind of got 4 locks to choose from through the course of the 80, and that's probably your best bet. You got to have a line-out caller. And so you're going to have to, you're going to have to play around that as well. So this is the part where, because of injuries, we don't know. They were obviously hoping RK would come back. The issue around this is there's some kind of nerve issue where he can walk fine, do stuff fine, but the minute he goes into the air and has to land on that thing, it doesn't feel stable. So all these guys, if they had to play in a World Cup final, they could play, even Ibn, but there's no way they'll risk it the rest of the season. Yeah, like, you wonder about guys like Jean Klein. He would be such a good addition right now at this moment, because a proper tight head lock. Even go back down further the depth chart and go to Jason Jenkins, someone who's not necessarily mobile, but you sometimes just need to man the position. But no, this is one of the few team selections in this year where I've really been on eggshells. I'm really waiting for tomorrow.
Yeah, that's interesting thing. And if Eldridge goes 7, like you said, and when Jason is off the bench, then what happens to 8? I think it's Jasper Wiese making his return, because from what I've heard, he's not match fit. Doesn't look like it.
Yeah. So psychologically, you would love to have Jasper out there. The final thing he did at Test Rugby was to take on 3 or 4 All Blacks and say, the cup is mine. You cannot take this cup away from me. You like that in a grudge match in Ellis Park. And if you have enough cover on the bench, maybe you throw him out there, not match fit, and you say, I don't really care, but you're not coming off unless you're throwing up. So do it, go. It's like a coach who took us on the beach and with his Kawasaki and just rode along with us and said, we're not stopping on Musenberg until everyone's thrown up. I think Jasper Wiese has that kind of mindset. I don't dismiss the idea of throwing him in for the hard carries over the gain line. I think that matches up really well with Blackadder or Kane or Savea, turn them into tacklers. On the other hand, if you want to mix and match the bench fully, you would say put Elrich low at 8. Put Ben Jason Dixon and Sia Kolisi, have that starting, unit. There's a lot of things that could happen here, but I do think that a guy like Jasper Wiese is owed, a really good jog against the All Blacks, and that there's something about it that you would think Jasper could rise. He could rise to the occasion. He always has before.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few of those videos. People have been posting them to show how he can run and just basically bowl over players in his way. And we remember that final scrum against the All Black, like you referred to just now, that he basically kept our hopes alive. Because if that scrum, we were on the back foot there. It could have ended our hopes right there. No, okay, I hear you. So next is the number 9. I think it's a bit of a toss-up between Williams and Ranach, like you just said. But the key question, I think, for everything is going to be who's at number 10. Are they going to throw in Sasha at the deep end against the All Blacks in a match like of this magnitude, or are they going to go for old faithful? I don't want to call him old, but he's definitely faithful and reliable Andre there. What's your thinking?
What I would do is start Andre and bring Sasha in. I would like the ability to sit in Sasha's ear on the sidelines, sitting in the stands, showing him what is presented, calling that in, have Tony in his ear, like just explaining, what are you looking at? That's a 2 set, that's a 3 set. Your channel is the 3rd one. I want to skip past, I don't. Making calls. And I think Andre would be able to handle that pressure up front. And again, we're not asking Andre to win a game in the first half or in the first 50, but don't get us in trouble. Like, keep us in, make it close, and then find your opportunities. And then you either bring in Sasha as sort of the Villy, in a microwave, you start the attack quickly because you're behind, or you see what he does with steering a ship, but with people around him. Andre could slot over to 12, which looked good. That combination looked fine between Andre and Mani, is when Andre was not the first receiver. I think he struggles a bit, Andre does, on quick. The decision to go back or side or keep or run. I think he's much better as an actual program. So I've never thought Test Rugby was for gimmicks or flourish in the beginning. I think you start a Test match with great respect. It's like a heavyweight, fight. So I would have Andre. That being said, what I'm hearing is that it will go the other way. that Rassie and Tony want to see what Sasha can do with the start. So if right now, if I had to bet, I would think it's going to be Sasha at 10. And then you have the safety blanket, the security blanket of Andre. And so I understand that. And I've said many times, on judgment calls like that, I have to trust the people who've been doing it well. I see the logic. I just worry a little bit sometimes about one step too far, just going one step too far, and then it blows up on you. So
too much too soon. Yeah, dangerous. Okay, so the rest of the team selects itself. It's going to be Damien and Jesse, Kirtley and Colby, and then Billy at the back. I think that's a fairly safe bet. In terms of the bench, then it's going to be Ox and Malcolm and probably Thomas and the front row bench replacements.
Yeah, it looked like Koch has a shoulder, so Tanks a swing prop. We don't want uncontested scrums, so let all props be swing props, please, from now on. Maybe that's the rule we have. And then you load up. Yeah, it's going to be. It's difficult to put everything down right now because of the changes and the injury status. But I would say the overall thing, the most important thing is we want to be smarter, and we want to be quicker. And if that can be the case with these anchors like France, possibly with Villy at the back, you have some anchors that keep it all sane. And then you want to be the first actor. You want to be like in the ring, we say, be first. If we're circling each other and we're posing, and we got switching my stance, and I got my leg here, like that, but be first. Throw first. And so I think they want to come out and in this match and throw the All Blacks something that they haven't seen. They haven't seen in Super Rugby, and they didn't see against England, and obviously Argentina plus. Whatever you saw against the Pumas, we can do that much better.
I don't want to get sidetracked, but I picked up on that Super Rugby jab you put in there. That's an important one. That little gap that the All Blacks are now experiencing in terms of really hard physical games like the Boks have gotten used to with the URC and the likes. I think that's going to bite them a bit. Are they really going to start feeling the consequences of that ill-fated decision of theirs to kick us out of Super Rugby and that kind of thing?
Yeah, they argue that we walked. We say they pushed us out. It's a bit like a marriage when you at a party and you only hear one, and then the next weekend you go to the next party and then the wife's there, and you go, oh well, it's a different story. But the truth is they didn't fight hard enough to keep us, and the truth is that we had more options. And a man is only as faithful as his options, they say. So here we are. I don't think they just missed the strength and the power. I think they missed the power allied with pace. It's the power-pace combination that a proper team, at its full flight, like the Stormers, with a scrum that can monster you, but backs that can dazzle you. The Bulls, when they're in the offloading game, and you have waves of Hanekom and Low coming at you. I think there's something that's difficult to replicate that. Yes. And Kiwis have told me privately, not so privately, that is a really big miss. And they realize, classically, the head guy at the Crusaders, Colin Mainbridge, has talked about that, kind of publicly saying, no, it's okay. We're fine. We can still get enough against each other. But actually, talking to people and say, how do we replicate that? So this is why the tours are coming back. I think it's New Zealand's realization that we have to play more against the Boks if we're going to keep ahead of Ireland and remain in the top two.
Interesting. All right, let's just finish the bench quickly. Your lock backups and the rest of the 7 front forwards, which will that be?
I think we're now just saying, are you a lock? You're on.
Yeah, true.
We down so many locks. I mean, have you actually counted the locks that are out? It's insane. If you add Eamon and Archie now, you're adding that to, I think, 3 that are already injured. So yeah, it's gonna it's gonna have to be. I think Nico has to, jump straight from the plane. I hope he was in the gym a lot, because it's gonna be a rude awakening.
Yeah.
At altitude. Montpellier is at sea level, guys. So the whole thing about altitude is it cuts both ways. It hurts both.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. So did you have him to start this game? I think he's going to start. like you said, line-out calls. We've got a problem at 4. Yeah, he's quite big. He's physical. He's got impressive sideburns, like you mentioned. That's scary enough. So, I mean, he must be in the team.
I think he starts so he doesn't play at all. I mean, there's no reason for him to be a bench guy. He's a line-out caller, par excellence. And as you know, if you play against the All Blacks, a lot of times the matches against the All Blacks, Springboks, All Blacks turn on lineouts. I get 3 steals, you have 1. That's a huge edge. It makes you throw differently. Being able to throw to the back, being able to form your drives, your maul drives, come from clean, good lineout takes, where everyone knows exactly where the ball's going. So I think you have to be sure that your line out is tidy, and Nico is the line out mercenary. He's been brought in for lineouts.
That
So that's what I would say, especially with Eben out, because Eben in a pinch could have called lineouts. So now it just makes it even more important that you have a proper lineout guy.
Right, so just enough about the Springboks now. What about the All Blacks? And I don't know enough about them. You said Williams might be there, 145 kilograms and the likes, but they've got a couple of players that have never even been to South Africa before, never mind played against the Springboks. That might be a bit of a problem. What are you expecting from them just generally?
Yeah, that's a really good point about people having not even gone. So they're first going to be, just wide-eyed walking around. We can tell that they're actually really enjoying some of the food offerings. So there's that. I'm not talking about Susie Poison now, guys. I'm just saying that if you eat a certain way your whole life and then you suddenly eat a different way for 1 week, we've all been there on holiday. We go, whoa, what's happening? No, Mighty Williams is a mighty guy. He's 24 years old. He got 9 caps. They think very highly of him. Ethan de Groot went down with injury. He has a neck actually, so just didn't heal. So he's on. I think it's more important to look maybe at who's his cover. So you have, I think, Ofa Tongo Nasi, who might be the backup. He's a swing prop. You have, on the other side of the scrum, you have Fletcher Newell backing up, some proper beef. So I don't think there's a bomb squad opportunity here so much. That also might be why Rassie's thinking about putting Ox on the bomb squad bench, because the All Blacks have their own bomb squad on props. It's not easy to monster them. Tyrrell Lomax is a proper operator on the loose head, on the tight head side. So maybe what he's thinking is, let's see Steenekamp up against Tyrrell Lomax, and then maybe he can survive that. Maybe he's parity. Maybe he even gets an edge. But then we know our best opportunity for scrum penalties is in the second half with Ox up against Fletcher Newell. Fletcher Newell is actually a really big power lifter. He's in the tradition of those old Kiwis that used to bring, weightlifters into the team, or boxers, or people that actually came from a different athletic tradition. I think the problems for the All Blacks sort of started around hooker, and it has to do with line-out throwing. We were on line-outs just a second ago. So you have Cody Taylor, who's a really seasoned guy, operator, and everyone knows him. But backing him up is Asafo Amua, who is an incredible power runner. Think of him as like Tanyela Tupo for the Wallabies, except as a hooker. But he's really a sketchy line-out thrower. And that actually is usually, for a hooker, the last thing they can learn is the ability to operate under pressure, throwing into a line-out. He's also going to be throwing to Scott Barrett, who's obviously someone that he can trust. But what about Sam Darry, sort of a novice lock? So you have a hooker, 75 minutes in Ellis Park, the entire crowd baying for your blood. Sam Darry gets the call, and you're throwing up a guy like Elrich Lowe, Peter Stewart Toy to contest, maybe even someone we haven't thought about, actually, because we don't know who's going to be locked in the final. I'll take a look at that, but I think you could have some interesting matchups. And what's interesting to me is that the All Blacks might be the ones that actually are suffering at hooker more than the Springboks. Loose forward is where all the debate rages in New Zealand. Does Sam Cane come back in? Do we put him back in as a starter, having lost the captaincy? Is Blackadder, Ethan Blackadder, Todd Blackadder's son, is he the proper, blindsider, their hard number 6? Or should it be someone like Dalton Papali who can kind of switch? The one thing they all believe in is Artie Surveyor. So Artie Surveyor starts at 8. It's not really even a proper 8. He's such a good player that he can play 8, but he really should be an open sider. And if you had him at open sider and you picked a proper number 8, like Hoskins Tutu or Wallace Satiti, you'd have more of an All Blacks carrying regime. Sam Cane's not really a good carrier. Blackadder hasn't looked very good in gain line situations. He's more of a defensive scavenger. So that whole pack situation looks like one prime for the taking. And what the Pumas did is they did exactly that. They matched them up front, and then Matera and Kramer and Martinez just ripped that All Black loose trio apart. The back line is very familiar to everyone. You know, you got a couple of Barretts. You got Jordy Barrett at 12. You got Bodie Barrett at 15. You have Damon McKenzie trying to take and own the jersey, but not really impressing so far. And you have TJ Perenara. So Perenara, McKenzie, Jordy Barrett, Rico Yanni, any number of wings, but Mark Talea and Will Jordan are probably the starters, and then Bowden Barrett. That's a proper back line. If you walked on the field and you're Jesse Creel or you're Cheslin Colby, you look across there and you see that back line, you know you're in for a hell of a day.
Okay, Harry, that's enough about that now. There's another game as well, Argentina versus the Wallabies, but we'll talk about that on Thursday. I wanted to just talk to you about this Felix Jones situation and all these coaches suddenly, or assistant coaches, leaving unexpectedly and leaving immediately, which is more important. What do you know about the England situation? I mean, Alec Walters just left the other day going to Ireland. He's one of the best, if not the best, strength and conditioning coach in the world. Now, Felix Jones, who we all felt a bit worried about playing, helping out in England, he's just left with no notice, basically, left immediately. What's going on there?
Yeah, we're in a state of flux, aren't we? In life, roles and titles are different now. So even though, like we've discussed about players where there's not really the starting 15, and then you have your starting 15, and then you might lose it, but you might not. But if you don't lose it, then you have it. And now it's more like mix and match on role players. Ireland does it, South Africa does it. The top teams do it. Something similar in coaching setups. Used to be there was the head man, and the head man had his guys. They were with him from, a long time ago. They were never really peers. I could tell them to shut up, and they had to take it. Now the assistant coaches are also stars. And, Sean Edwards is just as much a star as Fabien Galtier. He's the next one to go, apparently. Felix Jones. There was more buzz around Felix D, than there was about Borthwick. So, there's also this back to sibling rivalry. Mm-hmm. And there's also the issue of the prodigal son, the parable where you have someone who goes away, does something crazy, and then comes back. Sometimes the older brother wants to make them pay. And a younger brother's like, I don't have to, let's party, let's have fun. I don't think that the world is set up anymore with this, overbearing top coach. Even Rassie, who's, extremely secure, he couldn't treat Tony Brown in a bad way. Tony can go somewhere. It's not like he doesn't have options. I think the coaches that treat their other coaches well, like Andy and Rassie, they can keep people, they can gain people. You could actually see an opportunity here for Andy Farrell to scoop up Felix, to go back to the land, where he played before he broke his neck and had a truncated career. That would be an interesting story and scary because, in the end, having this much brain power on the same team is really bad for us. We don't want to have Felix go to Ireland. No, I just think there's Borthwick. Borthwick would have come up an old school way. You look at his nose and he's old school. So, he's just the kind of guy who said, this is the way it is. And it's a very interesting and ironic tale post Eddie Jones to say, after the Jones debacle, another Jones debacle, but it's a different way. Borthwick is going to have to talk to the chino, cranberry chino pants guys with the leather, elbow patches on their, tweed jackets, smoking cigars and going out to the Lamborghinis. He's going to have to assure them that this is not the same old thing, because losing actually 4, there's 3 that have gone, but there's another one that's on the verge, Sunfield. That's a proper calamity. And you look at, across the world, like we actually know the assistant coaches. This is unusual. I don't know if you go back 30 years that we don't know everyone's assistant coaches. Now we actually do.
That's interesting now. So all the fingers are basically pointing at Steve Borthwick, sort of a bit of a, maybe got his knickers in a twist about not being respected or something like that.
It's funny though, because I hear from the camp and from the players, they like him. They like that they know where they stand. They know that there's a boss. He's a very clear communicator. Possibly it's a issue of, old school culture versus new, where in the coaches, and we saw Chasing the Sun too, which was one of our most revealing looks inside a coaching room. And the body language interesting because Rassie didn't stand up. He didn't tell everyone to be quiet with his elbows or his posture, like often in business you see. Like I do that all the time. Like this is my room. I'm taking over. I actually was interested that Rassie was a more soft power coach. He didn't cut anyone off. Didn't interrupt Felix. He let Felix go. He said, "Come on," it's like a riff. I always think of Rassie as a jazz musician who likes everyone to play, crazy stuff. And in the end, he's the head man, fine. But I think he's okay. So I think maybe Borthwick would have been more of a clipboard, agenda. I'm sorry, Felix, that's 2 minutes too long.
Tick the boxes kind of guy. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
So what do you think is next for Felix? I mean, you wouldn't just leave without having something lined up, or would you? You would just sort of out of principle. Maybe going to Ireland, like you just mentioned, maybe even Sean Edwards replacing him in France maybe. Or is there any chance of him coming back to South Africa?
There's a clause in his contract which prevents him. I think he has to give a year notice. So it's sort of a garden leave kind of situation where England has it locked up. They didn't have Eddie locked up properly. And so, I mean, you can always buy things out. So I guess it depends on who wants him bad enough, but he's going to be expensive. I think it's your first question. I think it was a principle thing. It was I cannot work with you thing. It wasn't I've got another offer and I'm going to go make money. I think there's plenty of things to work out before he can do that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think he might end up just as a head coach at a provincial side, maybe Leinster, Ulster, something like that?
I can see Felix thinking he's a head coach. There's nothing that tells me that he's not. I'm just always struck, but there's 800 assistant coaches and there's only about 150 head coaches, and there's only about 10 of those that are really really good. So the funnel approach, it's like everything in life. There's a spectrum. I don't know where Felix sits on that spectrum on communication and PR and talking to boosters and having chats with old guys who don't know what they're talking about, but you got to pretend that they do, that kind of stuff, because that's also part of the head coach's job. Is he diplomatic enough? Will he put up with bullshit? I don't know. He strikes me as a really top drawer assassin assistant coach that you want to bring on and say, dig in all night on these things. I don't know if he's the head man that has to talk to the Minister of Sport.
You briefly alluded to it just now, but the way that Rassie runs that team is a bit of a compliment for him, because Felix stuck around for 6 years, isn't it? And then Alec Walters stuck around for a long time. The way that he treats his people is definitely less of a dictatorial approach or autocratic approach, and it comes down to his man management again, not just for the players, but also the coaches. Sort of a well done for him, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we've actually read. I really did like the book about Rassie. It really covered his childhood well, but we haven't really read the book about Rassie yet that encompasses how he got results in this phase. I think that's waiting to be written, and it'll be even more interesting because it's. I think whatever we think about Rassie is true, but I think there's always these other layers to him of keen insights, of great warmth, of I'll just talk about the couple of times I've actually talked to the guy. He's just really curious about everything. He wants to know everything. He's fun to be around. I think you catch him in a bad mood, probably he's not, but I don't think he's a one-dimensional coach. I think that's the same with the other top successful coach, Andy Farrell, right now. He's a very interesting guy. These people have to be intellectually curious. That's the word I was looking for, the phrase. Intellectually curious, because the idea they might get for the rugby match might come from gardening, or they might see something about someone doing a paint job and they go, oh, that's how I want to do my lineouts. I don't think he's a normal, textbook kind of rugby coach, and I think that's coming through. And I think people that like that are drawn to it. So I know why Tony's there. I can see why Tony would come and say, this is a guy who will let me do, he'll let me run, he'll let me play. And I think it's these are what they call halcyon days. These are golden days of Bok rugby, and we better enjoy it because they're fleeting, just like the All Blacks right now, looking back to their faded grandeur and glory and saying, there was once a time when we were feared, and now we're not.
Well, that's where we are now. We are feared now. We must just get used to the idea, like you said, the younger brother who's now stronger and smarter and fitter and faster than the older brother. Just believe it, and then you can already do it, but you need, once you make that mind shift, it's quite a dangerous position for the other teams for us to be in, isn't it?
Exactly.
Right, Harry, thanks, man. Appreciate it. We'll talk again on Thursday. Then we'll have a look at what teams were actually selected and then what we can read into that with all these injuries and likes. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Cheers. We're always right.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and Welman.